In our scripture this morning, this poor widow drops her 2 coins in, and everybody's amazed. Wow. I don't think that this story has really much to do with how much she's giving. And that's because God does not need our money, right? God doesn't need our money. You see, God deals in kingdom currency. God deals in our commitment, faith, love, hope. That's the nature of God's currency. That's called kingdom currency. So he doesn't need our money. And I believe this story helps us recognize the power of this kingdom currency. You see, what her sacrifice does, it shows us, it demonstrates us in a real way a standard that we can shoot for, a goal we can aspire to. It's a benchmark. Listen to this. It's a benchmark, but it's not a requirement. You know what I mean? You don't have to give absolutely everything you have in your life to have a relationship with God. Jesus wasn't impressed by her giving of the money. He was impressed by her commitment, her faith, the fact that she was using kingdom currency. She gave with all her heart. That's why he was impressed. But there's something tangible about her giving. There is something substantive, concrete about the fact that she took her money out of her pocket and she put it into the offering basket. And it's a lesson we can look at for ourselves and say, you know what? What did it take for that woman? What was happening in her faith journey, in her spirituality, that she could go to that level and just give so freely like that? It's a benchmark for us to see, where am I in my faith journey? How am I struggling with this issue? This issue of gratitude and attitude and a sense of selflessness. My commitment to be all in. Where am I with all that? Jesus is really chastising in the beginning of the scripture. He's really chastising those scribes, those religious elite. He's giving it to them for all he's worth. And you know what I think? I think the people around were delighted to hear this because they probably were thinking the same things themselves and were just afraid to say it. Jesus put it out there in black and white, and they were going, yeah, give it to them scribes. Yeah, they deserve it. They go around in their long robes and they say their prayers and they demand the respect of everybody while one hand is dipping into the pockets of the poor and the widow and those who have nothing and putting it into their own. He gave it to them with both barrels. And they went, yes. Yes. Finally, the hypocrites were called out. And after doing that, he sits down and he watches. Sees what's going to happen next. He determines what will happen next. You see, back then, when you gave an offering, they did it rather uniquely. Everyone would stand up where they were, and they would call out what they're giving. Y'all want to try that today? You want to try that? Should we change it? Oh, I'm giving $20 today. All right, here we go. That's the way they did it. They didn't have an offering plate they passed around. They came down, and they would put their money into a tuba-like shaped object called a shofar. They'd have 13 of these different shofars, and depending on what they were putting in money for, they would yell out what they're doing, put it in there. But this poor widow, very quietly, comes up and takes her 2 coins and quietly just sets them in there. But the noise from those 2 coins resounded like trumpets for Jesus, because she was dealing in kingdom currency at that point. He knew she was poor, she was a widow, and that she was giving everything she had. Trumpets, it sounded like to Jesus, because she was giving with everything. She gave it with everything and was all in. You know, you might say, in fact, indeed she was committed. But you might think that maybe she should be committed for doing what she did. I mean, she was down to her last 2 coins. Why didn't she go buy some bread with that money? Why didn't she get some goat meat or something like that? Or maybe some Twinkies or Ho-Hos or something, anything. But why was she just throwing her last 2 coins into the offering like that? Well, don't care for herself, it seems. She was totally committed. For some of you younger people, I'm going to mention a word that you may not be familiar with. It's called telegrams. We all use email now, but there was a point in history, it wasn't that long ago, actually, where they did things like send telegraphs to one another. If they had telegrams, if they had something important to tell somebody. And there's a story about this one young man who was overseas serving his country, and he's pining for his lost love, and he wants to send a message. So he tells the telegraph operator what he wants, and he says, well, it's so much money. And he thinks about it, and he says, well, I better keep it short and sweet, so I'm going to say, I love you. I love you. I love you, John. And the telegraph operator says, you know what? You paid your money. You actually have room for one more word. And he thinks about it for a minute, and he says, okay, I got it. I love you. I love you. I love you. Cordially, John. Some people's faith is like that. They're going, I love you, I love you, I love you, God. I'll give you everything I got, God. I'm all about you, God. I'm all about you. But when push comes to shove, when they're asked to commit, then it's more like, well, cordially speaking, I would like to respond to you, God. Instead of, I love you, God. The commitment that woman made was all in. She gave it all. She was dealing in kingdom currency. And it was amazing to those who witnessed it. She must have done it, though, because she thought it was going to do some good, don't you think? She actually thought that there was going to be something good going to come out of this. Reverend Barbara Brown Taylor writes about a woman from Hattiesburg, Mississippi. And you might have heard this story. I think it's a great story about an African-American woman who, when she was in 6th grade, 12 years old, had been asked to help her sick aunt who wasn't married. She was in the hospital, and she needed to take care of her. She took care of her for over a year. And when she was done helping her aunt for the year, her aunt regained her health and could walk again. She decided that she was just too big to go back to school. She's 12 years old. And she said, you know what, I'm just gonna work in the family business. And the family business was a backyard laundromat, basically, where they did things old school. They would take the colored clothes and they would wash them on the washboard, and with the whites they would stick them into the hot boiling water and clean them that way, and then hang them out on the line to dry for all the neighbors and whatnot. She'd work from sunup to sundown, and she did this for 75 years. She never got married. Worked at this tirelessly, the same job, 75 years. And on her 87th birthday, she contacts the representatives of Southern Mississippi University and tells them she has a gift of $150,000 for the university. You could imagine the shock. This laundress, all these years, had been slaving away, making these little contributions to her pile, a little bit at a time. It kept growing, and she had this huge gift to give the university. The press got a hold of this, and they were astounded that the woman did this. The faculty couldn't believe it. The citizens of the area couldn't believe it, that she had done this. And often she was asked the same question over and over again. She says, why didn't you do something for yourself? And she had a very sly smile. She would respond back, I did. I did do something for myself. She had made a commitment to deal in kingdom currency. She was committed and all in. But you can imagine that it took a certain amount of trust for that poor widow to be all in, wouldn't you think? You give your last 2 coins instead of taking care of yourself, doing something nice for yourself. She was all in. Everything. Had to be a lot of trust that God would be there for her when she needed God. I remember a couple of my little ones, when we would go swimming, they would stand in the shallow end of the pool, and they would splash their arms back and forth, and they'd yell up, Dad, 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 look at me, I'm swimming. with both feet firmly planted on the bottom of the pool, right? You've seen that. You see, they weren't prepared. They didn't have enough faith in their ability and in themselves to go to the deep end and jump in. They weren't ready for that. A lot of our faith is like that, isn't it? We stand at the edge of the pool in the deep end, but we're waiting until we can actually walk on water before we'll take that plunge. We're waiting for some signal or sign that it's going to be okay to take the plunge and move forward. And we spend our lives counting our coins instead of our blessings, never preparing ourselves to trust in Jesus. You know, the woman with those 2 coins, she helps us see the possibilities when we're grateful to God, when we have our attitude right with God, when we're committed to God, when we're with God, when we're celebrating with Jesus our life. She awakens the possibilities in us, doesn't she? How much could we do if we're fully committed to Christ? Now, each of you has a little envelope, a brown envelope. And inside this envelope, there's 2 coins. And as we come forward to take the bread and the wine this morning, remembering what Christ has done for us, I've placed 2 baskets out here. Take those 2 coins. And if you're ready to commit to Christ, just go ahead and put them in there. But don't do this on your own. If you're not sure how you're going to get there, then come to the railing down here and say, Jesus, will you help me this day? Will you help me today get all in?